From insomnia and back pain to irritability and depression, chronic stress can manifest in all sorts of painful and distressing ways. Now, it used to be the case that if you were chronically stressed, the recommendation by everybody was just to relax. These days, of course, people are much more savvy enough to realize that if you really want to address the root of chronic stress, you can't just treat the symptoms. You have to get to the underlying causes, the root causes. The problem, though, is that we have been trained to think of root causes as these mysterious secrets buried in our past that only, years of psychotherapy or some kind of intense psychedelic journey can cure. But much more often, the root cause of problems like chronic stress comes from our habits in the present, not the events of our past. Today, I want to share one of the biggest root causes of chronic stress that I see over and over again in my work, coaching and consulting, especially for high-achieving folks, and that is compulsive busyness. In general, being busy is good for our psychological health and well-being, but there's a particular type of busyness, compulsive busyness, that's unhealthy, and often it's at the root of chronic stress. Compulsive busyness is when you use being busy as a distraction from anxiety or fear. I had a client recently who told me that they were stressed because they were in meetings all day and they never had time to think and do creative work. But when we did a little brief experiment to free up their calendar to get a little bit more of this thinking and creative time, they actually got more stressed because they had, it turns out, a lot of deep-seated anxiety, mostly fear of failure, around doing ambitious creative work. And over the years, unconsciously, they had developed a habit of chronic busyness, saying yes to everything so that they were constantly busy in order to escape the anxiety of free time. Unfortunately, like most coping mechanisms, chronic busyness trades short-term relief for long-term stress and anxiety. Because when you avoid your fears, you generate anxiety about anxiety or compound anxiety, which is far more stressful in the long run. So if you struggle with chronic stress, it's really worth asking yourself, what am I really afraid of? And is the stress of avoiding it really worth it? Now, there are all sorts of ways to reflect on a question like this, right? You could do it with a coach or a therapist. You could discuss it with a trusted friend or family member. You could meditate about it, you could pray about it, you could journal about it. There's all sorts of ways, right? But one really simple way that I've found to uncover these kind of deeper, more unacknowledged fears is to start what I call a scheduled worry practice. Scheduled worry is really simple. It just involves carving out a little bit of time every day. 10 minutes is totally fine. And you just worry on purpose and on paper. You just write out all your worries. Now, while I usually recommend this exercise for people whose main issue is chronic anxiety or insomnia, a useful side effect of it is that it can help you sort of surface or uncover deeper fears that normally you tend to avoid even thinking about. The kind of fears that are frequently at the root of compulsive busyness and chronic stress. So if you're interested in this scheduled worry exercise, I've got a link to it in the description where you can download a short little PDF that I've created to kind of help you walk through it for the first time. Now, if you've been following along carefully, you might be wondering something like this to yourself. Wait a minute, isn't anxiety the root cause of chronic stress, since that's the whole point of the compulsive busyness? Excellent question, but no, and here's why. It's actually avoidance of anxiety, not anxiety itself, that causes chronic stress. It's true that you probably need to address the deeper anxiety in a healthier way if you want to stop the compulsive busyness and all the stress that comes with it. But that doesn't change the fact that fundamentally, it's the habit of busyness that's causing the chronic stress, not the anxiety. Now, this distinction really matters because ultimately, it's not about the specifics of the habit, in this case, compulsive busyness, or the type of anxiety it's designed to avoid, in this case, fear of failure. It could just as easily be, something like binge eating to numb out a fear of intimacy, or people pleasing to avoid fear of conflict. That one's really common. The bigger, more important insight is a general pattern where you have a symptom, like chronic stress, but behind that, the thing causing that is an avoidance habit. But that avoidance habit is a reaction to a third variable, often some kind of fear or anxiety. So again, it might look like chronic stress, being caused by compulsive busyness, which itself is a reaction to fear of failure. Or it might be chronic stress is coming from people pleasing, which is itself a reaction to fear of conflict. But the key thing to see here is that the fear isn't the real problem. Again, it's the avoidance of the fear that simultaneously prevents you from addressing the fear in a healthy way and continues to generate all the chronic stress or whatever the symptoms happen to be. From this perspective, emotional avoidance is the root cause of both the chronic stress and the unresolved fear or anxiety. Because while both may have their origins in the past, it's our behaviors and habits in the present that maintain them. Now, a really small way you can get started with both the specific issue of compulsive busyness and the more general problem of emotional coping is to practice welcoming anxiety rather than avoiding it. And do this, by the way, with small bits of anxiety. Don't do this with like the biggest, most intense anxiety in your life. Little bits of nervousness, fear, anxiety. When those show up in your life, it could be at the grocery store, it could be standing in line at Starbucks, could be in a meeting at work, like whatever. When those show up, instead of defaulting to either distraction and avoidance or worry and obsession, those are our two defaults. We either kind of run away from the anxiety or we get lost in it. Instead of those, try a middle way, which is to welcome the anxiety and allow it to remain with you while you continue on with what matters. So again, instead of running away from it or trying to get rid of it, allow it to be there, which is hard. It takes tolerance. You have to tolerate the discomfort of that anxiety. But ultimately, that's the only way to address the anxiety in a healthy way and get rid of the need for these coping habits like compulsive busyness that then lead to all sorts of other problems like chronic stress. All right, thanks for watching. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, here's another video from me that I think you'll really enjoy.